Right, well, this is a lot more difficult because I didn't set the turf, and it's always advantageous to do so. But we had a lovely dinner last night together, which began in a friendly spirit and went on in that spirit. Nevertheless, we didn't overcome any of our disagreements. Now, the important thing to remember, and I probably won't finish this paper, it's on the table, probably for the alternative, you'll have to read it. Let's remind ourselves where Christophe's question started. It's a question of motives, of motivation, and what they are. Now, what anybody's motive is at any point in time is never context-free. I would say this as, perhaps one of my foundational principles. There is no such thing as contextless action. Even if you put people, in the room without sensory stimuli, you cannot annul their biography. It's there. It's there structurally, it's there culturally, and it's there as an agent. Because we are very different agents depending upon, no, I don't need that yet. I may not need it at all. How do I get rid of it? Pro-tem. Oh, well, that's just hope it's not too irritating. Okay. Now, let's take the problem as Christophe has put it. He acknowledges that he is an individualist. I am not. I'm a realist. He acknowledges that there is the capacity in everybody for their motives to be intensified or reduced. I want to say something stronger than that. I believe motives and their intensification and reduction are matters that are emergent, that have causal powers, and that make a difference to the way we are in society. So Christophe's basic question, in his words, are the following. Which is the culprit? Bad motives, individualist, or circumstances, social and relational? Those are my comments. That turn even essentially good-natured individuals into beings who ignore the call of solidarity. And it's important that statement of his ends with a question mark, which is why he did the range of experiments that he did do. Now, note that these experiments are behavioral, that they are empiricist, and that they are non-relational, because these are really the sources of our differences. The reason I think we could be friendly about differing is because we both agree that motives, and particularly the motives that all social encyclicals, but particularly since Caritas in Veritate, insist upon, is that good motives, what makes the good guys, differentiates them from the bad guys, is that their motives transcend simple profit maximization. We both agreed on that. So we're a long way away from crude utilitarianism and even from Gary Becker, a sophisticated argumentation on the basis of utilitarianism. So let me just outline the 4 reasons why there is this major theoretical difference between us. The starting point, of course, is that I reject empiricism and reject it for the fact that ontological status is only granted to observables alone, which is why, of course, Christoph could make his recordings and draw his lovely series of diagrams. This is all external, observable, recordable data in the public domain. Now, I don't think this is either a good or a correct way of characterizing motives. Basically, because our motives for things like solidary behavior is not just an objective matter of recording how respondents, such as the students, volunteers used, state that they would behave in a hypothetical experimental situation. There are unobservable subjective factors that predate and contextualize what the actor is like and feels like and how he, she responds in an experimental situation. Subjective factors such as how much do you care for the poor? Which particular kind of poor do you feel something for? Questions about your beliefs. I don't mean religious beliefs here. I mean, if you ask different sets of people what constitutes a fair distribution of resources, they will give you very different answers. And those answers will link up to the political philosophy that they endorse, where what is defined as unfair coincides with the point at which that unfairness becomes dangerous for social stability. And there are structural influences that have normalized inegalitarian distributions of society's scarce resources. And I would suggest actually, Christoph, that one of your experimental terms, or the poor deserving, is a deeply historically conditioned term. I mean, it's there in English legislation about the deserving poor, and the deserving poor deserve a decent minimum. I mean, that was there in the foundations of the welfare state. So all that is going on in the background, and for any particular respondent, and it doesn't matter that they're students, I have no objection to that, every one of these respondents is sieving their response through their personal reflexivity. Again, another unobservable. We all know ourselves that we reflect about what to do in moral situations and dilemmas, but nobody else can watch us or listen in on our reflecting. We can question people. They may or may not tell us the truth. They may not be truth tellers. They may be self-deceivers. But that's the best we're going to get, is the response that they give us. And this was really the basis of where this whole problem began in the social sciences, began in Durkheim's famous study of suicide, where, although he doesn't put it in these terms, he's asking, are there objective conditions in which people do feel integrated and do feel solidarity to such an extent that they will not be observed or reported or put in a histogram as suicides? They won't commit it. And he leaves that as an objective factor and tells you, I'll just give you one example, that the bigger the family that you have or brought up in, and then supplement yourself later on, the less likely you are to commit suicide. It's as objective as that. But my question is, can you be held to be objectively integrated if you don't subjectively feel integrated? Wanted, loved, cared for, or any of the synonyms for this? And I would say no. So I will be disagreeing both with Christoph and with Emil Durkheim. Secondly, I think we can all agree that solidarity with others is not just a matter of making an abstract calculation of what a fair deal is towards them. Solidarity involves something quite different, qualitatively and quantitatively and causally. It involves human relations, relationality. Without feelings, I'm just calling it warmth as a recognizable neutral term, a warmth that links us in togetherness with the fate of at least someone or some group. I don't like it all being subsumed under identity. Identity isn't the most important things in our lives. Maybe for one or two people, but you can't reduce it all to identity politics. And that feeling of togetherness, the feeling that one belongs to a we, whether that we is myself and my partner, or myself and the people who live in the neighborhood, or the whole of the British people, in my case, or French people if I'm living in France. This is an emergent property. It's not an aggregate. So, you know, I don't feel any more of a we if the British population somehow goes up dramatically, and there are more people for me to relate to who are British, and you know, so on and so forth. But it is an ontological status. It's not an epistemological matter just of liking somebody or disliking another group. Now, in the social sciences, the problem always was, how do emergent properties and how do relational properties come to be called real? And usually, if they were acknowledged at all, and they were only acknowledged when empiricism was heavily critiqued, and we shifted from the perceptual criterion of knowing something was there to the causal criterion of if it's there and it has this effect, then that is evidence for its presence. Oh my goodness, then I won't finish. Okay, I know how to cut this short. These emergent properties derive from how the subjects interact together. Now note, in Christoph's experiments, there was no interaction whatsoever. It's just isolated monads stating their opinions about, and second thing to notice, about money alone. Money is not the only currency, and we've got plenty of heterodox economics that shows that it's about time. I mean, we've got banks that are time banks, effort banks, exchange banks, but not exchange of equivalents, exchange of skills. And these skills can be incommensurable. If somebody can play the piano, which I can't, but I can say, knit a jersey, and we swap, these things, it's up to the two of us relationally to establish what the fair exchange is. And it's not done in money at all. So I think there's something skewed about experiments that make us all into materialists of a cash kind. And this is backed up by quite a lot of empirical evidence, particularly that of Richard Titmuss about giving blood, where Titmuss found, and this is very salutary, that there is an inverse relationship between both the quantity of blood given and the quality of blood given, meaning how pure it is, and it's the other way around from the one you would expect. When it's a matter of free giving, there's more blood given and it's better blood. When it's a matter of paying for it, it just goes down like any other commodity. A lot of it has to be thrown away, so nothing has been given. And I find that very persuasive about how people react. The fourth point is that Gustav had a section which you didn't make much of here, but I think it was very relevant for discussing solidarity. Namely, he asked, I think it is a version of the dictator game, isn't it? Now, what about what you would give to your friend's friend, or even the friend of your friend's friend's friends? Now, when you get to the third iteration of this, of course, we maybe, and usually are, talking about complete strangers. Now, I do not want to rule out free giving to distant others. We can create moral harms for them through our motives. We don't know who they are. Why should we care about them? Let's exploit them. And yet, Gustav finds that statistically, social proximity does not increase giving. Now, I would like to doubt that relationally, and I think some of your good nurses would doubt this. When you meet parents in hospital who have freely volunteered to give one of their kidneys, or we had an example here at the Academy, was it last year or the year before? We gave a medal for the first time to a priest who found a member of his congregation who was in desperate need of a kidney transplant. He'd had one organ harvested and the other one was packing up. And this priest offered one of his organs. Now, I suppose the dubious question to ask, well, the question to be dubious about there is, what proximity of a relationship is there between a priest and his parishioners, priest and his flock? I'll just leave that for debate. So can I just have 2 more minutes to... 2 minutes. 2 minutes, no more. If I can get this diagram up. It wanted to be up the whole time before, but... It seems it doesn't want... here we go. Just want a second... what have I done? Something terrible. Now I want the other one. That's it. This is against the monad and against the idea that the only way, now you've got to imagine you're in a department, your standard economic department, economic or sociology or social science department. Now, our research question, we completely agreed that you start with a research question about solidarity and cooperation, is how does ego interact with those alters in the department that are his colleagues and vice versa. And the traditional way that sociologists tackled this was to say, well, it's a long, hard hermeneutic exercise in which you have to compare every pair of colleagues with every other pair. To cut a long story short, and it is a long story, I'm skipping over some of the most important names in it, to come to Donald Davidson's conclusion that the best you can get hermeneutically is your understanding of me, my understanding of Stefano. And it might be something simple like, why are we sitting here today at this time? And what does that remain, Davidson says? A peculiarly plausible hypothesis if it's well told, but still a fallible one. How do we know that somebody has not put a big check in my pocket and that's the only reason I've turned up at this party? There is no way of getting out of the elephant trap that is hermeneutics, even though one has to admit a lot of our relational daily life depends upon hermeneutics. There is always a hermeneutic moment. But the more important thing I want to finish off with is about the wider context and the solidarity that is built up, because it is a layered phenomenon, and if it works well, if it fulfills what the social encyclicals want it to fulfill, it will go from the couple at the bottom, these can be a couple of kids in a school playground, or a couple who are just married, right up to the peak of the polity, whatever form it is. So the last point to make is, if we want to understand what these guys, we don't know whether they're good guys or bad guys, because it's not an experiment, we've just given them a job contract. We want to understand what they will do in the department and what they won't do, or will do badly, or in a slovenly manner. We need to know not just their hermeneutic relationships with one another in pairs, and then create one of those matrices that we put on a big computer and get all excited about big data. Oh, it's gone. Why did that happen? We want to know about the relationship to something third, to their discipline. All of them will make contributions to their discipline. They will read articles for the students, for the PhD students in particular. They will copy edit. They will start up journals and work for journals. They will join their national associations and international associations. And all those commitments are actually solidary commitments that benefit different sections of the discipline, different sections of the profession. But the relationship between the egos and the alters will be filtered through the disciplinary relationships. So the relationality goes a long way. I haven't time to go into it. I'm going to stop. Because I put forward an alternative relational view of how solidarity grows as an emergent property, and suggest 3 reasons why it is extremely difficult for solidarity to develop at the macro level today, at the level of the politics that we've been talking about. But I must stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you. That is a proper discussion. Now, I think we can afford no more than 10 minutes break, because we have to come back at 5, okay? In order not to subtract time.